We open up tonight in a dark crypt beneath a chapel on the outskirts of Bristol at the end of summer in 1454. Cormac and Elined stand to the side in this concealed chamber in the crypt while the Cappadocian Hezekiah leads a young man to the slab, the stone slab. This man's eyes never part with yours, Elined, as he seems entranced, affixed to you in this calm state, until the sawing begins. With a crude metal hacksaw, Hezekiah starts rending back and forth on this man's neck, and his mesmerization instantly gives way to panic and horror as the screams start, and he struggles weakly beneath the blade, and the blood turns out onto the slab and pooling beneath it. His shrieks are soon replaced with the quiet guttural liquid sounds, the remainder of air in his lungs doing nothing but spewing blood as he finally stops moving. Of course, the sawing takes more time after that, and in raw and grisly silence, it finally meets bone, and then a grinding, fleshing sound takes over. After a few more minutes of this, Hezekiah quietly severs the head of this man and drags the body off of the slab. His sleeves and the bottom of his robes are drenched in blood, and he sets the head down upright on the very bloody slab. What has Elined and Cormac been doing during this time? We'll start with Cormac.
Cormac decided to go down to the end of the hall, if you recall, to stand guard, mostly because he doesn't have the mental wherewithal to kill an innocent in such a way. Even the screams of this man made him wince, and he keeps looking back down the dark hallway, hoping that they'll stop. And when they do, he sighs.
And Elined.
Elined, as mentioned before, remained in the room for a type of hypocritical vengeance. At the very least, she could witness the demise of one of the men that participated in her assault, although they were the ones who initially planned such a thing to begin with.
And does Elined get any gratification watching this man die such a savage death?
She has her hands folded in front of her, and though she does wince a bit at the sawing, she's not quite for the dissection of bodies. But yes, she does get a small, rather pleased-looking smile at the agony he seems to go through.
And as it turns to silence, I imagine Cormac rejoins the scene, and you see this mess in front of you.
Cormac makes the sign of the cross across his chest, looking decidedly uncomfortable. Maybe we should have drained him first. Less of a mess.
Hezekiah seems not to have been interrupted at all by your movement or words. He's intoning something quietly to himself, looking away from you and towards the head on the slab. It sounds perhaps Greek, and Cormac, because you speak Greek, you pick out what sounds almost like a recital of a poem relating to the infinite vision of death over life and the eyes of the dead being likened to a window into the unknown. And as he is reciting this, he is rubbing blood from the neck of this head across the axe which has been placed on the slab ahead. And and he rubs this blood across the blade of the axe, and then goes on to cover most of it, including the pommel and the shaft. After some time of doing this, he holds the head up, and you see him pluck an eye out of the socket and promptly brings it up to his mouth as he consumes it. But not all at once. He's eating pieces of the eye slowly, and you can still hear the mumbling of this poem through the chewing and the mashing of tissue.
Jesus, Mother of God.
His hands go out to each side, both of them still bloodied, in an inviting way, palms up as though waiting for hands to be met. Join hands.
Elined will pause briefly at that, but hesitantly do so.
And Cormac as well.
As you join hands, at first nothing seems to happen. He continues to intone more of this poem, this recital. But then he slowly guides all of your hands forward over the slab to the bloodied axe, and you all grasp at the axe with his hands guiding you as he is speaking. And your senses become hazed, and the intonation becomes all you can hear as it vibrates through your mind, becoming louder and hypnotic. Your vision fades and yours to blackness until there is a flash, and you open your eyes, and you both see the same sight as though seeing it through your own eyes. You're now sitting around a desk in a very fine and cozy study with 3 others. 3 walls contain closed doors to this study, and the 4th has a fine painting of a beach landscape. To your right, across the table, is a lovely petite woman of pale skin. Her dark blonde hair is done up in a bun and wearing a nice emerald green dress. To your left is a pale man in chain and gambeson armor, fit and noble appearing with short, military blonde hair. And at the end of the table is the last man, pale and exquisitely dressed. He seems to be some kind of finely done-up merchant in black attire with gold trimming. And his hands are on the table, leaning over it as he addresses the table. And a gold ring is prominent on his hand, bearing the emblem of the Gauntlet. In fact, everyone here is wearing that same gold ring. The merchant standing there looks to you all as he speaks. And when my contact came back to me, they reported he met with a velvet merchant named Patrick McNally at his warehouse by the East Dock and never came out. Nor did his garments. I decided the meeting was not worth the risk if high-ranking Mercer negotiators were going missing, and returned with my sample. But, he holds a finger up, this presents an opportunity, and that is why I have invited you all here tonight. If some rogue has gone out and captured this Mercer officer, we may be able to co-opt the kidnapping before the Mercers find out what has happened. And if we get our hands on that officer, surely we can find a way back to the source, to find the figure behind the Mercers. You feel your mouth open, and a voice emerges from your throat that is not your own. Why should we care even what happens to this merchant business? How does this impact the Covenant? And your hand gestures off to the side generally. The blonde woman in the green dress turns to you. The company of Mercers is growing more powerful by the decade. Gaetan and I have long suspected outside influence. If it continues to grow unchecked, England itself may find its national politics become unbalanced by its weight. and the royal court is already under great tension between the Duke of York and Margaret. The clean-cut knight to your left leans on the table as he chimes in. She is right. You and I have seen how kind politics plays into war, abroad and at home. Best to squash this before it gets out of hand. You feel some anxiety in your stomach. You don't feel good about this. You're angry. You again speak up, your right hand in a fist on the table and your ring prominent. It is Ragna. It must be. You said this merchant disappeared in her city, in her port. I say it was Ragna who did this. But I think it is she who is covering it up. She is a traitor to her people and to Canute. She cannot be trusted. Wolfric, you do not trust anyone. You and Simone both are afflicted with the same deranged... Wait. The woman in green looks off in the space between you and this man. I smell blood and oil. Her eyes widen, looking between you all. We are surrounded. You turn to the door and see flames licking at the bottom as smoke starts to fill the room. And you can feel the beast in you rising. Realizing now that all the door's edges are now intermittently flicking with the flames, and it's quickly reaching the inside of the room. Everyone around the table is up abruptly, several hissing, moving to the far wall by the painting. You grab your axe, which is leaned against the table, massive and finely polished. You call out to your friends as you stand. Steel yourself, friends, we do not perish here. You turn with a great sweep of your axe at the door to crash it open, and as you do, a blaze of fire bursts into the room, sending out screams and yells from your friends behind you. The door collapses, revealing the inferno in the hall, a true hell. On the other side, a man in leather patchwork armor crouches over a dead guard, looking up to you. His face is mottled and stretched and hideous. He hisses at you, holding a blade. You shout and swing with your massive axe through this opening, ignoring the flames. You swing through the half-destroyed door and send this creature flying into a burning wall as he screams and collapses through the burning floorboards. But no sooner do you recover as you see you are now on fire, your arm caught in the flames, and you yell, dropping the axe. As your torso quickly goes up like a tinderbox, you fall to the floor, writhing, hissing and yelling as you hear more screams of agony from the corner. You cannot see them, but you can hear their screams. You close your eyes, and you open them again. And you are back in the crypt. Holding at this axe, you see that all of your hands are still on this burnt, blackened, notched great axe, a red sheen of sweat on both of your hands. Make a willpower roll, difficulty 8.
Current willpower or total?
Current.
Okay.
The event strikes you, both of you, very sharply. You think for a moment you might flee the scene in frenzy, lost to the beast, with such an experience fresh in your mind, but you narrowly hold control. What?
Sweet fucking saints, what the hell was that?
Apparently, what the Cassandra was subjected to.
No wonder she had herself a little moment. I nearly lost control of myself.
Admittedly, it is not something I intend to experience again.
But we have more to go on than ever before, thanks to you, Hezekiah.
Yes,
You can see
your
that
efforts will not be forgotten.
Hezekiah looks just as shaken, his hands trembling as he backs away from the axe. A dark ending. Very troubling.
Sorry, could you repeat the name that Ragna was a traitor to? I wrote down the rest of the notes of that flashback, but not that
At the beginning
Okay.
of the vision, you recall, or did you already get it?
Yes,
Yeah.
it was written down in chat. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Elined doesn't get away from the axe. She's just staring down at.
Cormac waits to hear what Hezekiah had to say.
He seemed almost lost in thought. Eventually, in silence, he turns to look at you, perhaps wondering what you will say of this as you exchange glances.
The rest of the Gauntlet is in Ragna City now.
Yes. Yes, they are.
This may not bode well.
Know this, my friends. This vision was a truth known to none before tonight. And he pauses, as though thinking carefully what to say.
If they very well were killed for having this information, we could be next, is what I'm taking from.
Be particularly careful in whom you reveal these details to.
That's easy. No one. Except perhaps the rest of the Gauntlet. And he'll look to Elined. The unspoken assumption that Robert might be left out of this.
Yes, that is the extent I am aware of. Though, I could think of someone who would be very interested in the supposed culprit, but we know not if we can trust his assistant.
You're referring to Barbaros.
Yes.
Something to consider.
However, we don't know who that Tremere works for. We just know he never leaves.
I would be cautious in pursuing this Patrick McNally named. If this is what the previous Gauntlet perished for, he may well be dead already, or otherwise under supervision.
Wait. Cormac.
Hmm?
I have a thought. The person that is suggesting looking into these Mercers, his mansion is in the city. As
And
loath as I am to actually help the person who was willing to, well, give us some sort of form of payment for getting him into his sire's place, it could have more information there. Though if we are found, it could end up blowing up in our faces, so there's that.
I'd nearly forgotten about that, to be truthful.
But, to be honest, what is a life without a little danger?
Not too much danger. Look what happened to the Gauntlet.
Yes, I'm aware. But at the very least, we could see if there's any information pertaining to these things.
My God, did you see them? They were formidable, one and all. What is this they've chosen now? We're a ragtag bunch of whatever we are.
We are replacements.
Poor replacements.
We have not the same years nor experience as them.
They're better to control us, perhaps.
Perhaps. But I'd rather not linger on the reasons why.
I would just as soon recuse myself of any of this, if you understand.
Of course.
We do. We never spoke to you. We were never here.
He bows his head. I intend to go for a walk to clear my mind. I am troubled by these visions.
And we should probably get back before, well, the majority of them realize we're gone.
I wish you safe travels.
And you as well.
He nods before turning slowly to turn down the hall, leaving the two of you.
Do we make haste for York, or do we look into this mansion?
John Mark is headed to the mansion. Well, at least his men are. As such, if we head for York now, unless we intend to go through Robert later on, we won't have another chance.
So what are you saying?
That we can either do this and potentially get in a good deal of trouble, or we can go to York and end up getting lectured by our dear friend about not doing this.
It's not an easy choice.
No, it's not. They could very well be in danger. But there could be information there. And who's to say the information won't end up saving us later on down the line?
But if we get caught, everything we've learned till now will be for naught.
Yes.
I myself, as I've said, am not much of a burglar.
Nor am I, unfortunately.
I almost wish we hadn't met that sneak thief. Then we wouldn't be so contested now.
Yes,
Well,
it
I
is,
suppose we should just vote on it.
Well, there's only two of us.
We'll count our accomplice as one vote for checking out the mansion.
Alternatively, we can do something a bit more base in tactics and flip something. If it lands on one side, here you go. If it lands on the other, we go to you.
I have a coin if that'll do.
That indeed will.
Very well. Heads, we go to York. Tails, we stay and look at the mansion. Would you like to flip it?
By all means, you take the lead.
Alright, I think I'll go with Long Tom's suggestion to make even heads.
Alright, roll it out. Even is heads. And that's go to the mansion, you said?
No, heads is go to York. Tail is go to the mansion.
So your coin decides you go to the mansion.
To the mansion it is.
Though exactly how we're going to do this is more of the issue.
First step, we get a hold of the ungrateful child.
Agreed.
Did he tell us where we could meet him?
You recall something about the Golden Coin Inn.
Cormac looks at the coin in his hand. Oh, that's right. The golden coin. Let's get out of this musty crypt then and go have a look, shall we?
Yes, let's.
All right. Soon enough, the two of you make your way out of the crypt. This mausoleum and rise up through the chapel on your way back into the streets of Bristol. Heading straight for the Golden Coin Inn now.
Well, first, Elined had intentions of going to some feeding grounds. Some open feeding grounds.
Where's the rack here?
Rack is someone else's domain. Someone else's hunting ground. Not rack, I mean... port. Sorry. Mine got jumbled.
You could go to the rack. Of course, you always risk some disease, as sanitation is not very good anywhere, but it's worst there. For whatever that means to you.
Do I, since my character lived here for a portion of time, does she know any open feeding grounds that are not unsanitary?
Let me think. Your sire usually got by with some of the small domain that he held in the area just outlying his manor. He frowned upon his children using it too much, and your brother, Guy Bassett, often had to rely on it and fell out of favor with your sire because of it. So that or the rack are probably your easiest options. Or you could always chance areas that are claimed and pull the weight of your status. There are different ways you could go about this. What will Elena do?
The 3-side coin. I like that answer.
I don't want us to get bogged down with hunting, so I'm going to say that you can hunt at your sire's area. He probably will not mind, and you can probably get away with feeding as much as you need to tonight to not have to worry about it, because I don't want this thing to take up much more time.
Okay.
Yeah, Cormac will ask if it's alright if he engages as well.
She will allow him to. Well, it's not her domain, so she can't say she allows him to, but she'll present the question to her side.
Yeah, the two of you can fill up as needed. It takes maybe an hour to find enough people, but we'll say the two of you are full at the end of this. Where will you go next?
Why the golden coin?
Excellent choice. So we will transition, fading out as we see Cormac and Elined finishing up, feeding in perhaps an alley down one of these streets, and see them moving off in the direction of an inn with a little emblem of a golden coin. We will change scenes. And moving a bit in time and across England, we return to York, checking in on Robert de Vere and Thomas Chamberlain. And at this point in time, it is still around mid-September, and supposedly at the end of the month or thereabouts, the Duke of York means to travel to London, and it sounds as though Prince Ragna may be joining. So you have some time between now and then. How do Robert and Thomas intend to spend some of that time? Or what do they intend to pursue? We'll start with Thomas.
Well, as he said to her night of the banquet, he does still have a few questions for Ragna. Just idle curiosities mostly, but when the opportunity presents itself and he's not interrupting anything important, he'd seek an audience, as privately as she allows anyway.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
Absolutely. Sorry, you can go ahead.
Depending on how much time is passing, he would also take it upon himself to be visible in the streets of York, just in case Rothschild is out lurking.
All right. You do find some time, a few nights after the banquet, and you do catch Ragna. You see Ragna as you're passing through the great chamber. Of course, now it's put back together and prepared to hold audiences. The food and the song and the crowd's all gone. Lydia stands several feet away from Ragna as per usual, and she's speaking with another woman whom you have not yet seen. She looks to be in her early 40s, taller than Ragna, very comely, although stately and serious-looking. A noble if you had to guess, but she carries a purpose and thoughtfulness missing in the many halcyon and carefree noble women you've met. And she has on a very long and conservative wine-red dress. Really the only skin showing below her neck are her hands, which hold a very large brown tome. And they're speaking quietly as you enter the chamber, and Ragna turns to you.
Ah, Lord Chamberlain, excellent timing. This is Lady Eve Cavenant, Regent of Lionsgate and Viceroy of Durham. Lady Cavenant, this is Lord Chamberlain of the Gauntlet.
A pleasure. And he'll extend a hand.
A pleasure indeed to meet you, Lord Chamberlain.
And she holds out her hand, palm down.
And as befits her station as a regent, he'll dip and kiss her fingers lightly.
Lady Cavenant is the reason I may be so present in my own city, and not patrolling the northwest borders of the Pennines against the lupine infestation. Her talents are enigmatic to me, although their efficacy is clear. We have much to thank her for.
I've had opportunity to speak with one of your clansmen, the only one.
Her head turns a bit off to the side as she looks at you curiously.
Of whom do you speak?
A Magister Tredian Swift. I don't mean to imply that you might know each other, but... He'll shrug a bit.
And where did you say you met this Magister Swift?
Chester, in the service of Prince Barbaros.
Make a perception empathy roll. Difficulty 8.
To see which one of them flinches.
Alright, 1 success. You see a look of suspicion and perhaps confusion cross Lady Cavanon's face briefly when you mention this Magister Tredian and being in Chester. It's here and then gone very quickly.
I trust he was respectful, at least.
He was that, not terribly useful, but he was respectful.
I am pleased to hear this, and it has been a privilege to protect York, and my house is pleased with the relationship we have developed here.
And her eyes turning back to Ragna.
Though our numbers are quite few these nights.
Yes, I heard there was some falling out between Ambrose and House Tremere. A bit before my time, you understand.
Let me make a charisma etiquette roll, difficulty 7. Okay, 1 success. You feel like that was not the most politic thing you could say to a regent here, but you at least managed to deliver it with enough tact that you didn't completely embarrass yourself. Although it's obvious in the discomfort on both of their faces that it was something sensitive to bring up.
I am afraid many have flaws in our house, as in many other houses.
My immortal father raised me to judge each on their own merits. It's a trait that's served me quite well, both in business and other dealings.
She nods a couple times, but still looks very uncomfortable.
Well, if you will excuse me, I'm nearing the end of my work here. I must get back to the Lionsgate Chantry soon. And I do apologize I was unable to attend the banquet.
She looks back to Ragna somewhat regretfully. There shall yet be more banquets, my dear. Perhaps we shall all be present to share a meal at the next. And she looks between the two of you, smiling.
That would be most welcome. Lady Kavanaugh, and he'll bow.
She dips her head slightly. The smile is gone, and she definitely seems a bit more awkward as she turns to leave. Once very much out of sight and earshot, Ragna will turn to you, giving you a questioning look.
Did I speak out of turn? Apologies.
No apology is needed to me, my dear. However, I do believe that entire subject of the Tremere and London is quite sore for them still. It was barely a century ago.
I was not present. It was shortly before all that came to a head that my mortal father passed. I was at sea.
She nods. They have their uses, the Tremere. When watched carefully, as I suspect, perhaps the Chantry in London was not. A mistake Adam did not live to regret.
I couldn't speak to such things. I was but a child then.
She smirks somewhat, and perhaps you would do well to learn your history.
So few seem willing to speak of those days.
And perhaps I shall be your tutor. And she smiles playfully.
I find knowledge is best when it's shared openly. I would appreciate the opportunity. Though, it is curious. She seemed to take particular note of Magister Tredian.
I do not recognize the name, though on those few times I have spoken at length with Lady Kavanaugh about her clan or the Chantries, of which she is very reticent to speak of. She has never mentioned any presence of a Chantry in Chester, nor any presence of her kind. Perhaps that is where the confusion or pause came from.
Perhaps. But it seemed to me she recognized the name.
Honestly, you could not pick a group more unlikely to divulge themselves, unfortunately, even to me. Even with the relationship we have established. I am fortunate, at least, that we have her gifts here, in the form of protection. They became quite skittish after the events in London, scattered to the four winds.
Have you spent much time in London?
She nods, now kind of idly pacing off, walking further into the hall.
And he'll follow just over her left shoulder. A few paces.
Indeed, I have. I find much of my business draws me back there. Of course, it does seem to be the heart of England. Every prince seems to have business there, here and there. So it is no surprise that I am.
It is a hub of commerce and of immigrants.
I suspect this is leading to something. A line of questioning, perhaps.
A hunch. It seems to me someone who holds sway over the Lord Protector of the realm might have reason to have a more permanent seat within London's district.
She smiles very softly, still walking. You pass a couple guards going into another room. You are thinking quite far ahead in the future. A future I do not know if you accurately predict.
I don't seek to predict anything. I'm merely asking questions.
You're asking if I wish to supplant Ambrose.
As a Lord of the Gauntlet, my loyalty is to England and the Covenant. If the ground seems fit to shift beneath my feet, it would be unfitting of me to not be prepared for such a shift, so that I can find my footing again promptly, and my fellow lords and lady of the Gauntlet to follow.
Did you know that in our history, Adam was the only one to ever rule over all England as a Canaanite, the one prince above all? Not before or since has there been record of a similar occasion.
I have heard it said.
What do you imagine it takes to hold that kind of power?
A finger on the pulse of those nobles who matter, a significant martial force, a great force of will, charisma, leadership, and the backing of significantly powerful elders.
You are not a man of war, but you are a man of the sea. You have captained ships, yes?
I have.
During storms?
Of course.
How do you think you would fare if your ship was decided by vote rather than a single captain during a storm?
The riggings would tear, the sails would shred, men would be cast overboard. If you were very lucky, all goods would be lost, and half the crew would be swept aside. You are very unlucky. The entire vessel would be cast overboard, would be upturned, and every man on board would be lost.
Disaster, to put it succinctly.
In as many words.
She nods as she's still continuing at a slow pace.
England has peace for now. Calm waters.
And she looks to you, kind of gesturing.
What happens when we reach our storm? Here. Not abroad. Not in France. But here. What then becomes of our group, this covenant?
I imagine that depends very much on what that storm looked like.
Have you sailed through pleasant storms?
I have sailed through storms that are all wind and no rain. Terrible squalls that send massive rollers against the bow. I've sailed through storms that are all rain and very little wind.
But you were at the helm for all of it.
Of course. But then I relied on my mates, my deckhands, and my men to know what they were doing. Without their support, even the best captain can't hope to captain a ship on his own. Nothing of any significant size, anyway.
Underlings. Staff to delegate.
And she nods, kind of looking forward ahead.
Of course, every captain requires support. As I am sure Adam did when he had the support of the great cities. Food for thought. I simply express this to elaborate that I hope, if or when England faces its own storm, we will not be lost in a maze of bureaucracy, of discussion, that there shall be decision, decisive action.
And a single voice of command.
She looks to you and smiles quietly.
There is another notion that has struck me since I had arrived here. You have been a most gracious host, more so than I believe even a Lord of the Gauntlet might normally deserve. Did you know my sire? During your visits to London, I mean.
Your sire, Genevieve Silvers. I knew of her more by reputation and heritage than deed. Why do you ask?
I've been to many cities held by Covenant princes. I have not felt, shall we say, as accommodated as you have made me to feel since I've been here. And I wonder if there isn't... How do I say this without sounding... I wonder if there isn't some history I'm not aware of.
From what I can tell, there is much history you are not aware of. And she smiles again.
I meant specifically between you and I.
If you're implying something, I am afraid it is lost on me. Her smile fades.
Perhaps merely a flight of fancy. I've always felt that my sire kept me far too close to breast. Possibly a sense of overprotectiveness.
She nods. It is common among our blood to do such, with varied results, as you've seen for yourself. Perhaps she loved you. Perhaps she distrusted you. Or a mixture of the two.
Thomas smiles, a little wan. I think that last strikes quite close to the heart of the matter.
I kept Dorothy very close to me after her embrace, and... Her voice trails off.
And she came to regret or resent you for it?
Perhaps that is why. I was not a mother in life, though sometimes I wonder if this is a comparable feeling. The decisions we make for those we raise. As to your question of your comfort here, well, to that I can only say that I perhaps appreciate the service of the Gauntlet more than others, and do my diligence in seeing that they are well taken care of, as I as well wish to ensure that should the ground beneath my feet grow unsteady, I too shall have a ready place to rebalance myself, and allies at my side. And she looks to you briefly.
I will support each and every Covenant Prince, as befits their station and mine. But there's still a little quirk of a smile to the corner of his mouth.
She watches you with a faint smile of her own. The silence between you.
Confident that the innuendo has been received accurately. Thomas will fold his hands at the small of his back. I wonder if you hadn't been keeping tabs on me prior to my appointment.
Now you are becoming, or sounding more paranoid, Lord Chamberlain.
No. No, not at all. You wouldn't be the first coming to House Chamberlain hoping to make use of our resources.
Resources I have plenty of. Perhaps not in shipping lanes and contracts, but in other ways.
Of that I have no doubt.
I'm sure there are many in England whom I would benefit from supervising, though it is a great place, and there are many of them. I simply cannot keep tabs on such a great area, a great number of people, to look for talent or potential. Would that I could. Perhaps you should have been my child.
Tom will arch a brow. Who would you have replaced? Or would you have simply had 3?
She smiles faintly again. I am the Prince of York and a Covenant member. Who is to say how many children I may have?
You and you alone.
I find myself famished this evening. I mean to retire for a meal, but it has been enlightening speaking with you tonight, Master Chamberlain.
I felt precisely the same way. I will not keep you from your evening meal. My thanks for your time, Your Grace.
She nods and turns to part from you. And you can see a good 15 to 20 feet that Lydia has been following at a slow and absolutely silent pace behind you. And she follows after Ragna, catching up to her.
Good evening, Lydia.
She smiles at you as she passes, bowing her head briefly.
And he'll give a similar little bow at her.
The scene will fade as Tom departs from Ragna after his discussion, and the two part ways. We will transition to a new scene.
we will focus on Robert in the aftermath of the banquet. Robert de Vere.
First things first, he'll spend some time with Oswald. His main goal will be to learn about the troops that have been gathered at this gathering. Composition, numbers, things like that. Just get more of a general militaristic knowledge from him. I think it was Oswald, yeah.
Oswald was...
The other child of Ragna.
Oh, you're thinking of Jesper.
Oh, Jesper, yes. That's who I meant.
That's right. Jesper, you find him here and there over the next couple nights. And your goal is to find out more about the military aspect of the barons and counts that arrive at the banquet.
He'll go for that with him too. He's more interested in the militaristic side, but whatever Jesper knows, he'll just spend some time with him and shoot the breeze with him.
Sure. What is Robert's goal with this information? Is he trying to build rapport and try to win Jesper to his side, or does he... what's going through Robert's mind with this?
Maybe it could be a twofold thing. He would like more rapport with Jesper, and this knowledge could come in handy sometime. Never know.
Give me a charisma, empathy, difficulty 5. You made a good impression on him. So building more rapport and getting more information from him, just spending time wouldn't be too difficult. Do you have any specialties in that?
In this particular, for charisma, smooth talker.
I'll take that. So 4 successes for you as you chat up Jesper about the military side of the goings-on in York. And you might have to refresh me on some of those questions, so I'll just kind of tell you what he knows. He tells you that, from what he can assess, the Duke of York had this great banquet, and of the barons and counts that attended, each of them were known to be strong supporters of York. You're a bit more familiar than some because of your digging of the ongoing tension in the royal courts between the Duke of York and the Queen Margaret of Anjou, and her group, her own group of counselors, which seems to guide the king. This group is not loyal to them. This group is more loyal to York, to the Duke. And they command thousands. Obviously, the thousands of men are not here. Banners are not raised, the levies are not raised yet. It's a symbolic sight to see them all under one roof for one man, and you have to imagine that seeing the possibility of all these thousands of men could be intimidating to royal loyalists, or those more in support of Margaret. Many among them are of the Neville family. As you also learn from Jesper that this far north, there is an ongoing feud between the family of the Nevilles and the Percys. The Percys are somewhat backed by Margaret of Anjou, while the Duke of York and the Yorks in general seem to be more supportive of the Nevilles. There seems to be a budding alliance there, early in its form, but it's definitely there. What else did you want to learn about this, about the military side of things?
The troop composition of the Neville family. What are they known for?
The Nevilles, much as most Englishmen, they wouldn't be particularly distinguished from the Percys in their troop composition. The Nevilles are quite rich, and so they can afford good mercenary supplements. But that doesn't really change the composition, so English warfare is a mixture of light infantry, footmen, heavy and archers, and especially longbowmen, with a healthy number of cavalry, men-at-arms, and smaller, more decisive groups of heavy cavalry and knights. It's a good variety. There is no heavy distinction one way or another, and the Nevilles aren't disproportionate in their preferences compared to the Percys.
Both families are.
They're pretty comparable. And you would learn, because you're less familiar with war, as Jesper explains, these armies usually are comprised, the majority of them are footmen, these light infantry, and then supported by heavy infantry, as footmen are the cheapest. There are usually an equal number of bowmen or close to that. Horses are expensive, so men-at-arms and mounted soldiers are fewer in number, and the heavy cavalry knights are very few in number, but they can be very devastating when used appropriately. He teaches you a good amount of tactics in warfare, as you learn that he's been in many field battles, pitched battles.
Robert will soak up this knowledge.
After speaking with him, I would say you can consider yourself to have a dot of tactics. You can represent it as a dot of academics.
All right.
It's very basic and preliminary knowledge, but you didn't have it before, and Jesper is a willing tutor. His personal experience and his willingness to share it with you is very practical.
Well, he's at it. He'll get his view on the current politics.
Of the kind or the undead?
The undead.
He kind of laughs. He very quickly admits he stays out of kindred or Cainite politics, much as his sire tries to groom him to understand it, to play at the jihad. He tells you he has no interest. He wishes for a simpler existence, for superiors such as Ragna to see to the well-being of the land and handling the messy backstabbing of politics. He would rather know the enemy he is fighting is in front of him and holding a sword, and so he mostly stays out of court politics. He isn't very aware of what's going on, except that he is vaguely aware that his sire very much hates and distrusts Barbaros.
Does he know anything of Barbaros?
Does he know about anything about Barbaros?
Mm-hmm. And what's his opinion on Barbaros?
From what he can tell, Barbaros is or was a very formidable warrior back when Barbaros actually left to go do things himself. He doesn't know much else about Barbaros. You can tell he doesn't visit Chester very much, and so much of his information comes secondhand from Ragna, which is of course biased.
Right. Fading from that, Robert will interact with Dorothy again. And well, he'll make a comment about how sly that trick was to use Ragna.
To use Ragna's room?
Mm-hmm.
She seems pretty pleased with herself about that. And actually, we will open a scene as she does seek you out during one of these nights. Just a few nights after the banquet, you're approached by Dorothy. She comes to find you and invites you to join her on a walk to meet some of her friends. She does not tell you whom, only that they are of like minds. Do you join her?
Of course.
She smiles warmly and clutches to your arm. Much of her body is pressed against yours as the two of you walk into the night, and she leads you to one of the inns. But instead of going into it, she leads you through an alley behind the inn to a dark dead end in the road, closed on all sides by tall buildings. And she lets go of you to take a few steps away and whispers something quietly.
Robert will turn his senses and begin walking towards her, questioning.
You can make a perception alertness roll, difficulty 8. You can subtract your aspects in difficulty. Three successes. You hear at a distance, she whispers, "Revelare." And then she looks back to you, smiling as you begin to approach in this dim light, and actually ushers you to follow her. As she turns to one of the walls and opens one of the doors to these back buildings. It occurs to you, because you are now much more aware, that you're just now noticing this door. You don't remember if it was there the whole time or not. You just remember you weren't paying much attention to it until now, but now it seems obvious.
Robert will take a moment to marvel at this as he slowly approaches her to go through the door.
She seems bright and confident as she enters through the door without knocking, and following her in, you step inside to a humble room, comparable to a living room, with wooden floorboards and unpainted wooden walls, kind of like a rustic-looking cottage in good repair and well kept. The room is dimly lit with candles here and there. It's small and the ceiling is somewhat low, and there is a hallway at the opposite end that goes on somewhere further inside. In front of you, as you enter, is a small wooden circular table where two other men sit. You have seen them before, though you were not introduced. You saw them when you met Ragul, Ethan Sharp, down in the Undercroft, though they left in a hurry.
Robert will approach politely and
Both men
wait
stand
for
up.
introductions.
Yeah, both men stand up from their chairs as Dorothy enters and you enter with her. Dorothy is the first to break the silence. Robert, I would like you to meet Randall Penborough and Anselmus of Nottingham.
The pleasure.
The first to speak is the man on the right, apparently in his 30s with curly brown hair, somewhat unkempt, a thick mustache and beard, wearing expensive furs and a fine tunic.
Ah, Lady Nicolier, you have brought a guest of most high esteem indeed. Lord de Vere, I apologize we could not meet before. I am Lord Anselmus, Prince of Nottingham.
And he does a bow.
Indeed. How grand a meeting. Robert will...
The man on the left, much more finely dressed and cleanly dressed, in an elegant tunic and hose, dark brown hair that goes down to his shoulders, he interjects.
Viceroy, not Prince Anselmus. You should not misrepresent yourself. I am still Prince of Nottingham. You would not dare claim that title in front of Ragna, and you'd best hope he doesn't say as much to her.
And they both look to you.
I'm sorry, what was that? I completely omitted that from my memory.
Randall Penborough, the man on the left, interjected and claimed that this man, Anselmus, should not claim to be prince, and corrected him in being viceroy. Anselmus, he seemed to think he was prince. But Randall said that he would not claim that title in front of Ragna.
Robert just gives a kind of like the stare, like blinks a few times, like, yeah, I got that.
Dorothy speaks up.
Go ahead.
There is an understanding between Robert and I, a reliability and interdependence. Just as you may trust me, you may trust Robert. Is it not so, Robert? And she squeezes your hand, looking to you with a smile, but some concern in her eyes.
Indeed, what my lady says is...
Anselmus and Randall seem content with that and sit back down as Dorothy joins them at the table. Does Robert sit?
He'll join them, yes.
As they sit down and get more comfortable and relax a bit around you, Randall speaks up to you. Tell me, Lord DeVere, how do you find your status among the Gauntlet these nights? Do you lead the pack, or are you simply told what your place is? Or is it more collaborative than I imagine the Gauntlet to be?
At the moment, it has a collaborative essence. Everyone is, for the most part, independent. Perhaps you could say one steps. Direct conversations, in a sense.
They kind of exchange glances. Anselmus looks up to you again. I suspect you think there's room for improvement, or you would not have caught Lady Nicolier's eye. That is why we meet here. We all of us see in England many places that have room for improvement.
Oh, certainly, there is always room.
Surely, in your months of traveling, you have met other Covenant princes, seen their courts, perhaps seen sides of them the rest of us do not. What make you of them? Which among the Covenant would you say is the weakest link?
The weakest? That is an interesting... I can't say I have knowledge of every... deep knowledge, that is, to say the weakest, but... of the ones I do know of... I can tell that there seems to be many elements seeking to work against my own grandsire. If you are unaware of who that is, I speak of Prince de Martinique.
Well, that is interesting. Where does he see his enemies aligning?
Aligning.
You said he has many enemies, or so he seems to think, by your assessment.
Yes. He does have many enemies. And this whole invention itself, he has put much into it. Where they align, just looking for a weakness. I'm sure every Covenant prince has enemies that are seeking such the same thing.
And Ragna, what is your take on her?
She is cautious. Perhaps not as much overt strength, but I think she is careful enough to maneuver around such ploys. If appropriate caution is not taken, that is.
The three of them exchange knowing and measured glances across the table before Dorothy looks to you at your side, speaking to you. What do you know of Canute the Great, Ragna's sire?
Off the top of my head, precious little. Robert will spend the moment thinking, has he heard any at his time in Ragna's court about her sire?
Make an intelligence politics roll, difficulty 6. Since you have spent some time in Ragna's court in the past. One success. To your knowledge, that name has never been brought up in court.
No. I assume you'll fill me in.
This time just Anselmus and Randall look between each other. There may be an interesting opportunity, but if you do not know, perhaps a brief history lesson then. You see Randall shift in his seat. "300 years ago, there was a conspiracy against Lord Adam, the once Prince of London, I'm sure you know, Lord of England. Ragna was part of a coterie which uncovered the conspiracy to Adam. Of course, Adam had every conspirator involved slaughtered or set for the sun. At the head of this conspiracy was Raedwald, the Toreador Prince of Chester, allied with Velenvirk, the Nosferatu Prince of York. With their deaths, there was a vacuum of power. Adam appointed Ragnar's coterie mate Barbaros as Prince of Chester. He appointed Ragnar's sire, Canute the Great, as Prince of York, claiming Ragna herself was too young for Praxis. He pauses and steeples his hands, looking for recognition in you.
Robert nods along.
Anselmus kind of leans over the table, as though speaking more conspiratorially. Apparently this went fine. There's no great calamity followed after. But after some time in the late 13th century, Ragna abruptly became prince. The official explanation, as Ragna tells it, her sire entered the sleep of ages and delegated Praxis to her. Of course, no one is around from that time anymore to confirm it. But Wulfric, one of your predecessors, was. And he spoke quite candidly to me about Ragnar. and he pauses again with a smug smirk on his face.
To this, Robert raises an eyebrow.
He was here, in York, when she took the title. And he swore to me he saw the black veins in her aura with the gifts of his second sight. She bore the mark of the amaranth.
Robert holds a stunned finger. Cups his chin. This is quite the claim.
I'm afraid it was all before my time, but I spoke to Jesper about it as he was here during that thereabouts. He would not speak long on the subject, but he did tell me Wulfric was banished from York after some outburst in exchange with Ragna in court. Decades before he even held the Gauntlet title. And indeed, Ragna would not leave her manor or be seen by anyone for 2 years after the affair.
There is one other thing. There may yet be proof of her crime even well over a century later.
Is that so? That is quite intriguing. What do you suspect it is?
And again, Randall speaks up, also hunched over the table. Wulfric spoke. He spoke of Canute the Great as being a legend to his people. Of knowing him, that he held allies even among the mortal sorcerers and the savage Einherjar of the far north. He claimed that he believed Canute was protected by some enchantment, and Ragna was marred by a Norse curse for her crime, branded by what he called the Volknot, somewhere on her body.
And what indeed is this mark?
He pushes away from the table and reaches into his tunic. He pulls out a scroll and unfurls it across the table, spreading out with his hands until it's flat and you can see it. A symbol of the Danish pagans, representing flux between life and death. I found this etched in a library at my chantry. There are reports of it being used in ritual branding in more ancient mysticisms.
And the symbol, it is proof, even despite the brandings.
If it is on her body, it would be quite damning. The problem is, of course, if she does carry this on her body, it is well hidden, and I do not oft lay eyes on my sire while she is bare.
Robert lowers his head to chuckle. I'm sorry, where this conversation is heading is humorous to...
Indeed, it is something of a seedy request or task. But perhaps that is where you may be uniquely useful, Lord de Vere. You have more access to the Covenant princes, including Ragna, than any of us. If there exists a chance to detect this symbol on her, you may have the best chance of finding it.
I believe you are correct in your assessment.
This is no idle, peeping task that we would have you do, Lord de Vere, not for nothing. Should you succeed in finding this mark, and you are certain of it, there are old allies of Canute's whom I know would go to great lengths to avenge him, to free his soul to Valhalla. Finding this symbol could mean shifting a great power in England. Do you understand?
Robert's tone turns serious as he nods along. I do. And I suspect Ragna is just as aware that anyone laying eyes upon such a symbol would be quite damning to herself.
This symbol was well buried at my chantry. There are few who would recognize it, and even those would not know its meaning. And even those who know its meaning may not appreciate its power.
Are you perhaps suggesting, even if I happen to waved away, that she would not be cautious enough to cut out the tongue of the one who saw such a thing?
It's quite unlikely that she would expect you to recognize such a thing. Dorothy looks at you, batting her eyelashes.
Robert gives a playful smile. Ah, yes. You are quite correct at this.
Though you should be careful, my dear. This is Prince Ragna we are speaking of. I should not like to hear that you are caught in a burning building next. And she rubs at your shoulder gently.
Oh, what a tragedy for the world. I shall be careful at this.
Of course, you know, it could be considered treason even to speak of these things. And so, there is some trust going into this that you have been confided in.
Quite. I suspect you seek something of a guarantee.
What would you offer?
I suspect one of the most concrete would be sharing of the blood between all involved.
He looks at you a bit curiously. Randall breaks the silence. There is another way. I came prepared for such a contingency, in fact, on the hopes that you would be so agreeable. And he again withdraws from his cloak another scroll, but this one looks more like a legal document, although much of the penmanship is in red, a dark, almost crusted red.
Robert gives us a look over.
You're literate in Latin?
Would academics apply?
Literate is a merit. Did you take that? Unless someone can correct me, and I did it the other way around and made it a flaw. I'm pretty sure I made it a merit.
It's
that
a
a
merit.
house rule?
Elined has it.
Yep.
That's what I thought.
So does Tom.
Oh wow, completely misgrabbing that.
Yeah, unfortunately, and you also did not take Latin as an additional language, so this looks like gibberish to you. But there is a clear line at the bottom, and you've signed your name in the past. Simply an agreement of silence. Signed by all of us. Surely you could agree to this.
Robert studies it with narrowed eyes.
Dorothy looks to you, hopeful.
And this will be in your possession.
He nods. Safely tucked away at my chantry.
Only the most secure, I assume.
Lionsgate has never been found, nor broken. By any that was not invited, of course.
Very well. I can agree enough to this innocent request, which I... The event you think I would turn on you. Not if I somehow fail the...
I'm sorry, I missed the first thing you said.
You're just blindly poking. I'll repeat it. I assume that this will be held only in the event that you suspect I turn on you.
Correct. More of a precaution than anything. You may in fact find it useful.
Robert will nod slowly. Very well. And he'll assign his name.
You see that a quill is withdrawn, but not a quill as you've seen it. It ends in a sharp bladed point. And the first assigned is Randall, who withdraws it, poking at his thumb, making a quick line of his name. And it's handed around. Each person in turn pokes at their thumb and uses some of the vitae to sign their name onto this document, and then it's handed to you.
Robert will follow through, gathering blood for the quill and putting it on parchment.
You see some of the figures shift, almost as though moving. Some of the document seems alive, almost. Not changing, as though it's a different document, but almost as though the characters themselves have some life to them. And you don't get to watch this for very long before it's rolled up by Randall. He also reaches to take the scroll, which bears the Volknot. You should not want to have that in your possession, either.
I assume I don't have to remember strange writing. Perhaps the triune symbol would be close enough.
You may keep it if you wish, for memory's sake, though I would be extremely careful with where it ends up. If Ragna finds out you have this, you may not last the night. And he slowly passes it back to you.
Of course. I'm not seeking to get strung up on treason anytime soon. Robert will take the scroll.
I must say I am quite pleased with how this has gone, Lord de Vere. I was skeptical that one of the Gauntlet could be so amenable to our ideas. We are most fortunate that you also see England may do better than it has. And he nods, smiling to you, as they all rise from the seats.
Indeed, England first.
Well, thank you for your time, gentlemen. I think we'll be leaving now. And she looks to you, smiling, tugging at your sleeve.
Robert will take Dorothy's arm and prepare to head out with her.
And she leads you out as the two men stand there. And soon enough, you're back onto the streets and walking out of the alley. And the farther you walk, the harder it is to remember where you came from. You think, in a passing thought, which street you had to turn down to get to that alleyway, and the harder you think, the more quickly the memory of where this was vanishes from your mind. It's a strange occurrence.
Tell me, what clans or clan?
I think I missed the last half of that.
What clans were they?
Anselmus is of my blood, of the patricians, and as I understand it, Randall comes from those usurpers.
Ah, that explains the odd fog of memory I have. Must be sorry.
Yes, he does seem to have quite a few tricks like that. I find myself having trouble remembering how to get there. I suspect it is how they survive. Interesting, but a bit strange.
Very strange. But I suspect such precautions are needed.
She nods. I don't quite understand the methods, but I have seen them in practice, and that scroll which he drew up is quite impressive.
Do you think it was just a normal scroll? Perhaps enchanted as well?
You showed me something of that sort in the past. It should give you some level of protection on the topic at hand. I don't understand how it all works, but he tried to explain it to me and it all somewhat went over my head.
Robert says nothing but just nods. In his mind, he thinks he's just signed a magic scroll that perhaps binds him to some secrecy.
Alright, the two of you go on, walking into the night. Do you intend to keep her company, or do you part ways?
No question if Ragna... So, if she suspects Ragna is suspicious of her.
She explains to you that Ragna long ago stopped confiding in Dorothy and seems to tolerate her, but keeps her at enough of a distance that it doesn't really matter if she trusts or distrusts, that Dorothy is far enough outside the inner circle that she probably couldn't do much anyway. Or at least that's the impression that Dorothy gives you of Ragna.
Robert will only mention it's concern of his if he tries to get closer to Ragna. It may seem suspicious.
Dorothy kind of agrees and explains that as long as you're cautious and don't do anything overbearing, that you can probably get by on your status to keep proximity to her.
Well, he'll escort her back.
Alright. And the scene fades on the two of you making your way through York, escorting Dorothy back to the castle. And as that scene fades, we will pause and take a break here, and we will come back in 15 minutes. What are we doing?
Well, I have a pain in my lower back, and I might have pneumonia.
Have you named it?
What?
Did you say pneumonia?
No, I was kidding anyway. I said a pain in my lower back, and then I cut myself off.
Oh.
Have you named it Robert?
Oh.
Poor Robert's getting picked on so much in this game.
Or have you named it Thomas?
Well, that's what Jean-Marc calls his back pain.
His is a bit lower.
It's treason, then.
That's okay. It seems like we're all getting into some good old treason.
'Tis the season, then.
For some treason.
I'm glad that not everybody hopped on the same boat and that we're seeing some divergence, because I think that's more interesting, although I do feel bad that Robert's getting picked on now.
What do you feel bad for?
He dug his own grave.
It's all the cheese.
Well, you make the right allies, you don't necessarily need the rest of your coterie to back you.
Pretty much.
Unless you make the wrong allies.
Pretty much.
But how will you know until the end? Welcome to the Jihad. So we return, the scene opening back in Bristol, following Cormac and Elined, making their way into the Golden Coin Inn, meaning to speak with the sneak thief and opportunist, Alfonso di Bologna, child of Gaetan. You make your way inside, and the hour is fairly late. There are still some people up and about. This inn, this first level of the inn, serves as a tavern, as many do. And so there is a man behind this wooden counter ahead of you who seems to be alert and smiling as you enter. A few bar patrons off to the side, drinking quietly. This isn't one of those rowdy bars that you've been to in the past. This tavern is fairly quiet. There are some stairs going up to some rooms. So the two of you enter and into this scene.
First thing Cormac does is sweep his eyes around the room and see if he can lay them on de Bologna.
You look around and he doesn't appear to be here immediately. Can I help you? You hear a call from the innkeeper down the hall.
He's far enough away that we'd have to yell if we want to speak to him.
Kind of, yeah. He's kind of half shouting to you as he sees you just kind of loitering in the doorway.
Cormac will look to Elined, then approach him.
Elined will follow, but keep an eye out just in case.
One bed or two? He looks between the two of you.
Actually, we came here looking for someone. Maybe you can help.
Oh? Continues to smile innocently.
We're looking for Signor Alfonso de Bologna.
Of course. He maintains his smile and lifts up the board that separates you, closing it as he passes by. I shall go alert him. And he goes up the stairs.
Either he's a jolly fellow or he's hiding something.
For all we know, it could be both.
A couple minutes later, you hear the steps of wood on, or boots on wooden floorboards, creaking, as a familiar sight of Alfonso de Bologna appears, stepping down. Ah, friends. It is good to see you here. Perhaps you have made a decision more soon than I expected.
One best discussed in private.
Yes, as Cormac said, it is not a matter to speak of openly.
He grins, nodding. Right this way. And he turns to ascend the stairs again.
Elined will follow.
And Cormac behind her.
He leads you up a couple staircases up to what you think is maybe the third level, and down a hall that's very bare and simple. It's carpeted wood, but not the highest quality you've ever seen. Down at the end of the hall, there is a room open. As you pass maybe a half dozen of these inn rooms, the last one, the door is open, and standing there expectantly is the innkeeper. He maintains that placid smile you've seen him have, and he seems to wait there expectantly.
You sly dog, he'll say to de Bologna.
He's quiet as he continues to lead you into the private room. The innkeeper smiles and nods at each of you as you enter, and closes the door on you as you enter the room. Inside, there is a window out onto the streets. The room is a little bit more spacious than you might have guessed. Perhaps you spent more money on the rooms than the hallway or the tavern. The bed is well appointed. There's an armoire and a dressing screen. It looks quite comfortable, you think, for the average kind traveling through here. And of course, there is a table and a set of chairs. He goes over to close the wooden boards over the window, giving you more privacy, as he sits down behind this table, waiting for the two of you.
The innkeeper still in here with us, still smiling?
No, he closed the door behind you.
Gotcha.
Elined will remain standing, hands folded in front of her.
I take it you do not trust me, my lady. Else you would have sit, surely.
No, it is not that.
What does Cormac do?
Cormac does sit. And he says when he crosses his legs, "Well, I don't trust you. Well, that doesn't mean we can't help each other."
Wise words. One cannot be too careful these nights. I would not trust me either with such a strange, perhaps even suspicious offer in the night. It is good to be cautious.
Mm-hmm.
And we have taken other precautions, of course, in case we go missing.
His smile broadens into a laugh. I would not dream of such a thing.
So, Cormac, weren't you commenting earlier about us being followed?
Aye, that I was.
You are the Gauntlet, lords and lady, of course. Half of you show up in Bristol, you are bound to draw attention. It was
This
not
is true
mine.
enough.
Sorry, go ahead.
I did not expect it to be your men. And us being followed is understandable enough.
Well, I trust I would not see you back so soon unless you had made a decision. And I hope it is a good one.
Yes, after some deliberation, we have considered your offer.
He leans in expectantly, with a smile.
And we believe that it could potentially be beneficial to our investigation. Though exactly to what extent, we have no clue.
Please understand this took some deliberation. It didn't fall down to the toss of a coin or anything.
She actually smiles a little bit back.
Of course. I understand these decisions must be made with great gravity. But I am pleased to see you back here, sitting and speaking with me. Do we have a deal, then?
We have a
It's
deal.
something we would like to try, though we have been debating the methods as to how.
You have status enough to dismiss every soldier there. This is not Jean Marc City.
This is true enough. How long ago did they come?
His eyes go off into thought, thinking. I should think almost precisely around the time that news reached Bristol that, well, your predecessors... His voice trails off. They arrived almost the same time.
Do you know if any messengers have come to give any updates lately?
I'm sorry, any what? Messengers?
Messengers, yes.
Messengers to the men.
Yes.
Well, I can't say that I've detected any. They do sometimes receive courier, but not lately.
Mm-hmm.
Then as I see it, there are
And-
two ways we can go about this. We either sneak in as you initially proposed, or we throw around our weight a little and ask the soldiers to leave.
Benefits to both, and drawbacks.
He gestures to Elined, apologetically since he cut her off.
Though my question is less about tactics. I have heard you are a merchant, and I understand this may be a sensitive question, but have you run into the mercers at any point?
His face sours a bit.
Yes, that is the general reaction I expect for such a question.
You'll find few merchants who have not run up against them. I'm afraid. Even here.
Isn't that the truth?
What does this have to do with, my late sire, or his manor?
Nothing as of yet. Is merely something that we have been gathering information on.
He nods a couple times. I think perhaps it might be simplest for you to use your influence. Of course, it may draw some suspicion, but you do have a good purpose for doing so. And he raises an eyebrow almost as though, with a different intent.
It would
Indeed,
mean
we do
little
have a good purpose. However, if it is seen as such, it's an entirely different matter.
It would mean little risk for you and more for us. Although if we were caught sneaking in, that would be trouble for all of us.
And as mentioned before, we typically aren't the more sneaky type.
Then I think what you're saying, Elined, tell me if you disagree. We're going to try to make the soldiers leave amicably.
That is the only option I can think of.
And deal with
Think
John
of-
Mark's wrath.
Yes, that. But to be fair, well,
They asked us to investigate this, damn them anyway. They didn't tell us the method in which we could.
is this true?
I'm willing to take the risk, he says. satisfied, leaning back in his chair.
I believe I said in the past that adversity is the mother of wisdom. As such, I will go along with this as well.
He folds his hands together and smiles. Excellent. Then I shall accompany you. And together we shall find out all the riches that my sire held there. And information, of course.
Cormac just chuckles.
A 50-50 split, I think, is fair. As fair as merchants can hope for.
Riches I care not for. It is what pertains to our investigation that I am concerned about.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Cormac.
All he was doing was chuckling to himself because this guy is so obvious as to almost be a caricature. He's got one thing on his mind, and it's gold coins. I don't see a reason why we should delay.
Nor I.
The Gauntlet does have pressing matters to attend to.
He nods. He'll rise from his seat and gesture out. Shall we?
Yes, let's.
Cormac nods and gestures them out.
He smiles and makes his way out.
That will follow.
And Cormac behind closes the door behind them.
You see that the innkeeper has not gone far. He stands there almost like a statue with the same simple smile he's had since you first met him. I bid you a good evening. Please come
And to
back to
you
the
as
golden
well.
coin.
There's a good lad, Cormac says, patting him on the shoulder.
Alfonso seems not to have paid him any attention at all and is halfway down the hallway already.
Cormac will whisper to Elined on the way downstairs. Dominated, do you think?
Quite possibly.
We'd have to be careful.
She nods.
Alright. So the group of you make your way out of the Golden Coin Inn. And soon enough, you're on the road with Alfonso di Bologna. And he leads you back to the manor of Gaetan de Corriveau, which you can see at a distance is one of the more impressive manors. It has metal pike fencing all around it. You think perhaps maybe the only more impressive estate here is Kincaid's himself. There are guards standing at the metal gateway entrance, And you see beyond that there are more guards at the doorway into the manor itself. There are not many lights on, and the guards seem to stand at attention almost like statues, dressed in chain and broadswords at their side. They bear the Pegasus symbol of Jean-Marc.
How far away did we stop from them?
You can stop, I would say, we'll say you're maybe a block away when you see all this.
I hope we don't come to a failure of diplomacy.
I have confidence that you will do all that is necessary. But perhaps you should take the lead.
What, me?
Well, you are the Gauntlet, aren't you?
Yes, well, Elined, you and I. Perhaps we can make this good.
Yes, so at the very least we can attempt.
I have no doubt they're going to resist us anyway. They'll certainly be on orders.
Yes, most likely. Well, which is unfortunate.
Ah, well, diplomacy faces everyone. For his part, Cormac straightens up, putting his right hand gently behind his, and taking on the gait of a lord, striding calmly into his manor.
I will take an appearance etiquette, difficulty 8 from you.
Not bad.
Oh, 2 successes. What's Elined doing during this time?
Elined will walk beside him and attempt to straighten herself up and walk with meaning. However, she still intends to keep that cloak of hers draped around her.
I will take the same roll from you. Although difficulty 9 for you, you look much more like a peasant than Cormac does.
I'm going to spend willpower on this.
Alright, with willpower, that's 1 success. So you begin passing through the metal gates as the 2 guards stand there, eyeing you suspiciously. They don't stop you immediately, but they do stop Alfonso as he's following after you. They start getting into an argument over what he's doing here. You seem to have had enough presence that you must have some business here for some reason. But they don't seem to believe he does, and you can see he's trying to talk his way out of it, but it's not going extremely well.
Elined leans to closer Cormac and whispers, "Should we get him out of this? We did not agree to any boons. We could simply leave him there."
Let's make him sweat a little.
You see them continue to argue, and he made it a couple feet in before they stopped him, and they're forcefully shoving him back, and he falls to the ground outside the walls. And he calls more loudly, "But perhaps my lord might explain to them why I am here and accompanying him and his lady."
See? Elined actually chuckles a bit and says, "His lady? Am I that what I am now? Is that what I am now?"
We have come on official business. Cormac will tell the two guards at the gate.
They turn to you. "What kind of official business?"
We are lords of the Gauntlet, here to investigate the unfortunate demise of our predecessors, one of whom to which this manor belonged.
He looks to you with some confusion. "Stay right here. Let my captain know. He'll be able to sort out if you're supposed to be here or not." And he passes by, his armor and gear clanking a bit as he goes. The other man continues to watch you, a hand on his hilt, but no apparent ready movement. You can see some of the men closer to the actual manse itself seem to be paying attention now. There's 4 more closer to the actual walls of this building, and the man you spoke to goes off and speaks to one of them.
"Come now, there's no need to have your hand on your weapon. Do we really seem the type that would be able to fight all of them?"
You don't, but he does. Got my orders, miss. About a minute later, the man you spoke to, this guard, comes back, and preceding him is another soldier, although this man looks a bit better equipped. He has a fine helmet on, and he does have a dark cape on the back, which does seem to make him stand out from the rest. "I am told that you represent the Gauntlet."
That is so.
"You bear the sigil?" He looks down in the darkness.
Cormac will hold up his ring.
As does Elined.
He takes a moment, looking very seriously at the two of you. "My Lord de Martinique had strict orders not to allow anyone into this manor. Is he aware of your presence?
Cormac, not being the type to lie, waits to see if Elined interjects anything.
We have not spoken to him in some time, but he is aware of our investigation.
I do not know anything about an investigation. I know only my orders are very strict. And if you have not had dispensation from Lord de Martinique, I would have to inform him of your presence immediately.
Of course.
That is quite expected.
I hope for all our sakes, your business here is indeed official. And he steps aside.
This man, and he'll nod to Di Bologna on the... Well, has he picked himself up off the ground?
He has stood up and he's lingering just at the edge, the periphery of the metal fencing. He seems to be listening just at the edge of being able to listen.
Is an expert witness. He has come because he has a personal relationship with the deceased. We expect that you will not hinder him further. Notify de Martinique if you must.
He nods, his face grim and serious. You've seen the look of seasoned warriors, men of many battles, and this does seem to be one that you recognize in his jawline and his scarred face. He gestures over to the guards who were holding back Alfonso, and he enters into the courtyard. Simple misunderstanding. Thank you for clearing that up, my lord. And this guard captain seems to look off towards the manor and gives a sign to the men there. You should be troubled no more.
Cormac nods. You have been most gracious, sir. That we will remember.
Gracious, hopefully not foolish.
Certainly not foolish.
He looks over to one of the men at the front gate. Send word. And he nods and begins moving off. And the guard captain as well seems to step away, going further into the courtyard. And the three of you are left together.
And Cormac will begin the trek up to the manor.
All right. You make your way up, and the two guards there standing at the wooden double door step aside after looking at you for a moment. They have torches in their hands, though you're only barely at the edge of being uncomfortable as you pass by them. And you enter inside, and Alfonso follows.
Elined will be the one taking up the rear of this line. And as she's passing one of the guards... Are there any she's passing that don't have open flame?
No. Both the men you pass have torches in their hands.
Then she will head inside as well.
All right. The group of you step inside, and it's dark in here. No one is actively walking inside the manor. Everyone seems to be outside of it. So, of course, there's no candles, but from what little light you can see kind of coming in through some of the skylights or moonlights, it does seem to be quite regal. There are some fine statues and busts on display, a large winding staircase leading up to a second story. The floor is immaculate marble tile from what you can tell. There are hallways going off, although, again, it is quite dark in here.
Any lanterns around?
There are some by the doorway.
Cormac will pick one of those up. Not lit, I assume.
Correct, not lit.
Alright, take it outside, too. There's guards standing outside with torches.
Mm-hmm.
Might I get a light from you, sir? It's quite dark inside.
He lights it without any question, and you have a lit lantern.
He closes the shutter quickly, fighting against the urge of his beast to bolt.
It's only a brief experience you're able to hold it back long enough to get this lantern going.
And he'll carry it inside. Here we are, then.
Ned will glance over at Alfonso.
He looks excited. There's a large smile on his face.
Do you know the layout of this place?
Yes. This is where I come in handy. I imagine you'll be wanting to look over his texts, his library, perhaps?
Documents, notes, that kind of thing.
He nods. And he'll begin walking off, staying on this first level, going around the large staircase into a hallway that goes further in.
Cormac falls into step.
Ned as well.
Soon enough, he leads you into a well-appointed library. Many fine carpets over the tile floors. A surprising number of bookcases for a merchant. He seems to have collected many tomes over time, perhaps rare texts. There is a large desk at one end of this library with a number of notes, scrolls, papers. All the paper you could want in here, I imagine.
I also imagine there's something here that de Martinique does not want us to find. Otherwise, why all the theatrics of the guards?
My thoughts exactly. Which means he will be rather angry with us, will he not?
Well, that's between you and Lord de Martinique. You have the status to fend him off, I'm sure.
Do we now? I suppose we'll see. In any
Either
case,
way, it shall prove amusing enough in time.
and you have free rein to purloin as you will, but I suggest you keep anything that you do take under wraps, so to speak.
Yes, it will be quite the issue if we end up leaving and they end up catching you on the process.
Well, don't you worry about me. I can be quite discreet.
Very well.
He grins as he departs off of a different hallway.
I know of several places he can hide things, Cormac says with a wolfish grin.
She smiles a bit and says, now. Let us get to our investigation. We'll have time for making fun of others later.
I'm just imagining what fun he's going to have stumbling around in the dark out there. He's not taking my lantern.
At times, if someone knows a place well enough, they often do not need more. Now then, Elined will approach the desk and look through the documents on it.
And Cormac will start looking through the bookshelves to see if there's any hidden messages there.
All right. So the two of you begin sifting through your predecessor's protected study. And as you do so, we'll fade the scene on this montage of you looking through as we transition. We return back to York in the time between the banquet and the departure of the Duke of York. And Long Tom, you've been spending some time out and about in the city for a number of nights since you arrived here, hoping perhaps that Rothschild may show up. And indeed, there is one evening when you are walking the streets, when you are visited by a voice you recognize all too well. What a curious sight to see a Gauntlet member on his own out here. You hear this voice as you're passing an alleyway, the voice coming from further in.
Tom doesn't turn around, but he does respond. I was wondering when I'd hear from you.
You can faintly make out the outline of a man hunched over and hidden in the shadows. You know if you got too much better of a look, you might be disgusted by him, but he is well concealed, and there are not many passers-by. You've been busy, I suspect.
You suspect or you've heard?
Well, that is for me to know. I imagine you are not walking these streets for your own enjoyment.
Well, I'm rather enjoying the fruits of the labor now. So who's to say?
What fruits might those be?
I was hoping to hear from you again.
And so you have heard my wonderful voice. I don't suppose you have more poetry for me.
Sadly, Lady Elined has made for Bristol, and I'd rather not see a repeat of our last interaction repeated here in York, so I've not shared your potential presence with my current companion.
So the gauntlet is fractured, you would say.
We are of two minds on how to proceed. The facts shift.
I wonder if facts do shift, or perhaps only perception of them.
Perception, understanding. The more pieces fall into place, the more precarious things become.
Do you not think it dangerous that there are members of the Gauntlet who do not view things the way you do?
Not at all. The only proper way to address a bad idea is with a good idea. If I happen to be wrong, I'd much rather it be pointed out.
Well, you've gone to so much trouble to find me. What, pray tell, have you on your mind?
And he's going to look up and down the street a bit.
There are not many people out. Once in a while you see a rider pass by, but very few people are coming down this street and no one's coming down this alley.
I chose to come to York because you seemed to think it a safe place to hide out, lay low. I wondered why.
Safe for me. But is it safe for you?
In the short term, certainly. In the long term, will it be safe for me to have come here at all? I haven't an answer for that question.
I hear you spend much time with our prince here.
She's quite welcoming. More so than the other prince of the Gauntlet has been thus far. Though that raises questions on its own right.
While I do not trust Barbaros, I would be more cautious of a prince who is so willingly inviting you into her bosom, so to speak.
Thomas taps his nose a bit. That was rather my point. At least Barbaros is obvious in his barbarism and distrust. He wears his emotions on his sleeve. Ragna is far more difficult and wily to read.
There are perhaps some things safest not to read at all. To answer your question, I am safer here because of my associates, my contacts here. I am comfortable, but the places I go are not the places you would go.
You think you judge me too swiftly, sir?
Perhaps not. It depends on if you assume that I am speaking of the sewers on the water.
The sewers, the water, the slums, the rack, ports. Places that a proper gentleman wouldn't choose to find himself. As I said, I think you judge me too swiftly, sir. I am no proper gentleman, as you well know.
You hear this creepy laughter from the darkness. The silhouette shifts slightly.
I can be safe in many places. Though Chester is not among them anymore.
I spoke to a member of House Tremere who seemed quite, shall we say, somewhat alarmed at the mention of Tridian Swift. Happen do you know why?
Yes. The secrets of the Tremere, well guarded. Who was this that you said you spoke with?
Lady Cavignon.
Yes. The Viceroy of Durham. Powerful. She did not take well to this name, Magister Tredian?
It gave her pause. She definitely tried to hide it. But she took far too close a notice. You are asking an awful lot of questions and giving far too few answers.
Well, it is my nature. But you have done well by me. I may part with a few gems. I have spent much time in Chester until my recent departure.
I must again express my deepest regret for that whole episode. I would not have had it go that way.
No, that is not what I meant. There was great movement of the usurpers. I and my associates tracked much of it. But we did not detect any reaching as far north to the west in Chester. Strange, don't you think? Where did this Magister Tretiad come from?
Perhaps not a magister at all.
He is quiet in the silhouette still.
Perhaps someone has usurped the usurpers.
But to what end, I wonder? Why take on such a contentious identity?
Trading on a contentious name is better than trading on a suspicious name. I caught many a counterfeiter trying to sell goods under the seal of my house back in my day.
Well, perhaps if you can answer that, you might find out who this Magister Tretiad is, and perhaps why he is so close to Barbaros.
Perhaps indeed. I wonder if I might ask one final line of thing. I hate to trouble you any further. Know you of Ragna's plans?
He's silent for a very long time.
I know some of what the prince would have. But with you so close, who's to say you might not trade up on your allies?
As I told you, I serve England. And I'm not completely certain England would do better under Ragna than it did under Adam.
You know more than you let on, then, if you suspect such things already.
Merely seeking corroborating evidence. It's quite a different thing to have a second source verify my suspicions than simply to toy with my own.
Well, a man and a woman might have a discussion about many things and have the same thoughts, but evidence on the matter is entirely different. Where it pertains to her, evidence is quite scarce. She has done well to see to that.
I would expect no less. But you have cause to suspect. Which means there are at least some flies in the ointment.
Indeed. The more closely you inspect Ragna's personal history, who she comes from, where she comes from, the more dark the picture becomes as to where she is going and who she is becoming.
Knowing what you know, were you in my position? Would you choose to throw your lot in with her?
You focus in on the darkness where his silhouette stands, and as you're looking at it, just the hint of light which forms this silhouette looks upon his face as he turns enough for his lips to be just barely present, and a smile forms as he backs away and the silhouette disappears silently until there is nothing but darkness.
I'll take that as a no. You may be many things, Rothschild, but I judge you to be a good man. I thank you for humoring me.
Silence is all you have responding to you.
Which is as he expected. And he'll head back towards the castle at York.
Alright. You make your way back, and you're entering the castle again, passing through the courtyard outside, and you hear some giggling behind you, and you see that Dorothy is accompanied by Robert, and they're coming up behind you, together, arm in arm. And this would be just after your meeting, Robert.
Taking note of Thomas, Robert will give a jovial greeting. Well, hello there, Thomas. How have you been?
Some hardcore robot voice right now, man.
Is that any better?
Much better.
All right. Robert will give a jovial greeting to Thomas. Hello, Thomas. How have you been?
Quite well. Many questions answered in a good, brisk stroll through a proper city street. Helps to clear the cobwebs from one's thoughts.
Hopefully you found the answers to the questions.
Just the one.
Might I ask what the question was? You hear from Dorothy at Robert's arm.
His glance is kind of sidelong. Do not think I will be so easily tempted as my associate. Your while is a waste of this.
You think so harshly of me. Tragic.
No, quite the opposite. You are a comely young lady, and any young man upon whom you chose to grace your attentions would be hard-pressed to resist.
There's no need to kill the moment. If you wish to be left alone, so be it.
Not at all.
Perhaps I shall leave the two of you together. I do not wish to get in the way of any Gauntlet business, but perhaps you shall join me in my chamber later. And she looks back to Robert as she parts from him.
Robert will give her a wink. Till next we meet.
She smiles lasciviously, and as she passes by, she looks you up and down, Tom, passing into the castle. She seems to give you a wry smirk as well.
Robert will wait a good time before he's certain she's gone. So then,
She's a predator posing as a house cat.
oh, I do not doubt that. She is very mischievous. Well then, anything new to share?
I'm having second thoughts about Ragna as an ally.
Indeed. I must say I've been approached by parties seeking her downfall as well.
I did not say such things, nor should you. She has her ploys and her plans. And at present I have no way of foiling them without it costing my neck in the process.
Then your time with her was quite poor. You seem to hit it off so well.
Quite the opposite. We have quite the rapport developed.
Then what new have you discovered that has seen her unfit in your eyes?
Her ambitions are greater than I had expected. And I have reason to suspect that perhaps she would not be the best fit for the station she seeks.
Are you still searching for the one you believe would?
The problem with leaders, especially of large nations, is that they all fuck it up eventually.
But you would not give Ragna even a temporary chance at the reins.
Perhaps my standards is too high. But I can't think of any single Canite I would want at the helm of this particular ship. To borrow an analogy.
I do wonder how Prince Adam managed it all.
It's very simple. He didn't manage it all. He managed those that managed. And they managed those that managed beneath them. It's a system of delegation and hierarchy. Something that doesn't exist currently.
Yes, hierarchy does seem to be missing.
I wonder. This fits with other suspicions I had as well. You've spent time in York. Do you know if there's an office of the Mercer's Company here?
Out of character, does Robert know this?
Yes, the Mercer Company holds offices in every major trading city, so Bristol, York, London.
Does he know the location of their largest one in York?
Give me an intelligence, alertness, difficulty 7. It's not something you were paying attention to during your stay, but you might recall having noticed. One success. You do think you recall one of their offices not far from the docks themselves. You could probably find it again.
I think I vaguely recall one of their main offices. Just down by the docks. If you have nothing better to do, perhaps we could take a visit.
Not tonight. Another late night stroll might raise suspicions I'd rather not.
Aha. And what's suspicious about strolling around?
The comings and goings of the Gauntlet are not like to go unnoticed. Going for a stroll through the city streets could be easily explained as hunting. Going twice in a single night raises questions. Questions I'd rather not answer.
Avoidance, then. Prudent.
What have you been up to? The two of you seem like you might have found something worthwhile to get in.
Plenty. Let's say it was an interesting night.
For both of us, it seems.
As you say. Perhaps I should get your opinion on Ragna further. You do not see her as a leader material. And you've built quite a rapport. What exactly have you done to impress her?
I've asked all the right questions and alluded to very little. I've demonstrated guile and tact. Some minor missteps. Those are easily enough forgiven. She seems... I don't know how to put my finger on it. She seems at ease. As if... And to give a look around the hall.
There are guards posted around, not necessarily standing next to you, but maybe 30 feet off, posted at each of the hallway entrances and exits.
She seems as if she has become quite self-assured of my support. And I have done nothing to dissuade that impression.
Well then. I shall have to keep that in mind. I still do owe her a favor after all.
Don't misunderstand. She is still quite formidable, and very worthy of our respect at the very least.
No, I would never think she would be anything lesser to maintain what she has had. No, I'm certain she has it for a reason.
What I'm saying is don't underestimate her. Or her child.
Robert will smile at that. Point taken. Have you concluded business in York?
And as much as can be planned. We merely need to wait for Elined and Cormac to join us.
The next opportunity, we should visit the Mercer Company.
on the morrow. Though, do let Dorothy know that she's welcome to visit me in my chamber if she wishes to discuss matters further.
Is that so?
Against my better judgment.
Well, I can't blame you for putting the offer out there.
It wasn't an innuendo, Robert.
No need to be so grumpy.
But you needn't tell her that.
I shall not. I'll leave a mystery to it.
Quite right. Though she's almost certainly waiting in your chamber. We'll find out. You to yours, I to mine.
Very well then. Till next we meet.
Till tomorrow.
Robert nods at this and begins to head off.
All right. The scene closes on the two of you parting ways at York Castle. And as the scene fades, we will end the scene and end the session for the evening, since it's 9 o'clock, and we will pick it up again next week. Conveniently on a cliffhanger for Cormac and Elined.
And a cliffhanger for Thomas and Robert, sort of.
Sort of.
How much of a slut is Dorothy?
All right. Let's do 2 experience all around, and we'll do some entertaining role players, starting with Cormac.
I see. I think I'll give it to Thomas tonight.
Yay.
For navigating politics like a champ.
Just living out my idiom.
Or at least doing a great job appearing like he's navigating it well.
Ragna seems convinced.
Fake it till you make
Wow.
it.
Thomas.
I'm gonna give it to Cormac. He's being very much himself. He's definitely dodging all the lies that would normally trip him up. He's doing a pretty good job of being the skeptic without necessarily being the vocal naysayer.
Cool. Elined, how about you?
You know what? I'm gonna give it to Robert, because he's getting in on some of that good old trees than the rest of us are.
And he also happens to be getting it in.
Yeah, now he has a new target of trying to sleep with Ragna.
Doesn't have to sleep with her, just have to see her naked.
Yeah. That could
All
happen
but saying he's
anytime.
trying to sleep with her is so much more amusing.
Tom would have so much better opportunity. I'm just saying.
He would, but, you know, still a secret for now.
Tom can't have all the plot threads.
But I want them all.
Robert, how about you?
I'll give it to Thomas. He did politic very well.
I am politic.
Except for that time when he said something that wasn't very politic.
But he got a good role.
You
so
say that like
count
you think
that.
it wasn't deliberate.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, I heard the Tremere aren't very welcome in London right now. You what, mate?
Too much from here.
Y'all talking like you think I didn't do it on purpose.
Well, that was fun. I enjoyed that. Got through a lot of good stuff, and we've got some awesome scenes coming. Probably the imminent rejoining of the Gauntlet. I could see that happening next session. So that'll be cool. And then, yeah, 2 experience all around. And we are on for next Sunday. So have a good Turkey Day, and I'll talk to you guys throughout the week.
Farewell. Have a good Thanksgiving, everyone.
Cool.
Yar.
Have a
Take
good night.
care.